If you're learning to quilt, here are all the items I strongly recommend, and then a few that are just nice to have at the end, especially if you are following my Sawtooth Star Learn to Quilt series. First off here, I have a long acrylic ruler. This is 24 inches. You will use this for so many things. I am going to recommend like 3 different types of rulers here. If you only have the budget for one right now, get this one first. After purchasing a long acrylic ruler, I would then suggest a large square. This is 12.5 inches, and then after that, some smaller squares. On my Amazon storefront quilting essentials list, I have a pack of them. I think there's like 3 or 4. It's great to have. You will use it for so many things. Next up is a cutting mat. Honestly, I would splurge right away, even if you're just beginning. This is actually a smaller one. I would go much larger, like 24 by 36 inches. I have that on my storefront as well. If you only have the room or the budget for something smaller, just go as large as you can, honestly. I also strongly recommend getting a rotary cutter and blades. I love these blades. And then I also love my rotary cutter. This specific one locks and unlocks and is easy to hold. I would also invest in a nice pair of fabric shears and only ever use them on fabric. Next, I would also get like just a small little travel scissors. These are really cheap, or like a snips like I have on the right. Either one will work. This is just for snipping those threads that are hanging off. You are also going to want to get quilting needles for your machine. And if you have been sewing and never changed your needle, please go do it right now. You will want to change your needle in your machine often to avoid all sorts of other issues. Next, you'll need some pins. I really like these flathead ones, but any pins will do if you already have another kind. Next up is a seam ripper. This is for, well, ripping out your seams when you mess up. One of these may have come with your machine already. This is one of my favorite tools and I highly, highly recommend it. It is called a Hera marker and I use this instead of fabric markers with ink. This is to mark lines on the fabric and it takes out the step of having to wash them out or get them out with heat, and it never has to be replaced like a fabric marker with ink would. If you're going to be quilting on a small home domestic machine like I do, I am going to tell you, you need to get a walking foot. My first few quilts I made without a walking foot, so I know what it's like. And honestly, this will change your life. You need to try a walking foot. There are lots of just universal ones if you don't already have one. And when we get to the quilting step of my Learn to Quilt series, I will show you how to put it on. Next, you will either need pins or basting spray. You do not need both. So if you already have pins, don't feel like you need to purchase the spray, though I do prefer the spray. This is for when we put our quilt layers together. And you will also need thread. Thread could be its own series on its own, honestly. I really love using this Aurifil thread. This is 50 weight. And then for the quilting portion, I actually used a thicker thread for more bold stitch lines. Aurifil is a little more expensive than what you might find at like Joann's, but honestly, I think it is so worth it. I can wind so much of this on my bobbin. I never have thread issues. I honestly think it is worth a little extra to get nicer thread. These are binding clips. I like to use these and pins for different reasons. You will want to have an iron and an ironing board or like a mini iron and a wool pressing mat. I actually have both. The wool pressing mat and mini iron are really nice to have right next to your machine, but you do not need both, especially when you're first starting out. Here are some items that I don't think are essential, but are really nice to have. First is some glue and some extra bobbins. I like to wind up a bunch of bobbins before I start quilting. This is starch for spraying my fabric. This makes it stiffer and easier to work with. This is a guide bar that you can attach to your walking foot. This is great for straight line quilting. Instead of having to mark all your lines, you can just follow the guide bar instead. And this is one of my newer tools. It is a flying geese ruler. I love this thing. It's for trimming down your flying geese. It honestly is a lifesaver. I love this thing, and it even has a guide for fast 4 flying geese and all of the sizes you need to make those. And then I also really like having a needle minder right by my machine in case I don't have my pin cushion and I put my needles there. That is it. I hope you join me on December 1st for my new Learn to Quilt series.